For months now, Gavin Newsom has been dropping hints he's going to run for president in 2024. It's been like an Easter egg hunt, but instead of Easter eggs, he's been leaving us a trail of hair gel slime, and the slick is getting thicker by the day. From the constant attacks on conservative red state governors like and especially Governor Ron DeSantis, to his multiple national media appearances and even his little visit to the southern border, I mean, my God, we get it already. You're running for president, Gavin. He might as well hang his hairdryer in the White House bathroom at this point. I'm sure Joe wouldn't even notice. And now he's launched his Campaign for Democracy tour. Apparently, he also wants to get the hell out of California because he's traveling to red states to take on authoritarian leaders he says are directly attacking our freedoms. And by freedoms, he means he's fighting for genital mutilation for minors, drag queens for kiddos, and unfettered abortions. As for the other freedoms, well, not so much.
There was a pretty startling split screen. You had 1,000 kids in Nashville out there protesting the lack of action on gun reform measures. Well, you had Governor DeSantis signing a bill on permitless carry behind closed doors.
Yeah,
what did you make of that?
Scared to death.
Who is he scared of?
Scared of the people. Scared of the
people
public.
In Florida?
Yeah, that overwhelmingly oppose that position. But I think the majority of NRA members, probably oppose that position. No background checks? No background, none? Really? I mean, no training? Why would we do that with weapons of war?
Which is what permitless carry means.
That's extreme in the extreme.
The man is a tyrant, and he's run his own state into the ground. I know because I used to live there. Imagine what he'd do to this country. He's going to run, folks. They will shove Joe off to the side, I'd say by midsummer, and make it look like it was his idea. And then boom, boom, pow, Gavin will announce, and he will be their nominee. And guess what? If we don't play this really well, and I mean like really well, he will win. I know what you're thinking. California is such a mess. There's no way average Americans would vote for him. He's just too extreme. Wrong. The Democrat machine is so strong, and quite frankly, it's been birthed and raised in California. They could probably put up a paper cup and have a decent shot at winning the general election. Early voting, ballot harvesting, mega fundraising, all of it. The model started in California, and Gavin, he knows it well. So listen, I'm going to be real honest with you now, and it's going to piss some of you off, but so be it. Ron DeSantis is the only one who can beat Gavin Newsom. I love Trump. But when 50% of Americans believe this latest indictment witch hunt against him is serious, and with 50% already saying he should suspend his campaign, we aren't going to get enough independents to win this time. It ain't 2016. It's not even 2020. It's way worse. Popularity and electability are two very different animals, folks. The only person who has a chance is Ron DeSantis. He's got the most compelling case against Gavin Newsom. Look at how many people and businesses, big and small, fled California for Florida in the last 3 years alone. The stark differences in their handling of COVID and freedom and masks and vaccines and taxes and regulation and crime, all of it bodes very well for Ron DeSantis and view. Hell, even Gavin's own in-laws fled to Florida. So to all of those out there on the conservative side who think it's a good strategy to nosedive Ron DeSantis out of loyalty to Trump, you're not seeing the bigger picture. You can stream mega from the rooftops. Hell, you can tattoo it across your butt cheek for all I care. But all that gusto ain't gonna do crap if we lose in 2024 again. I love Trump too, but this is just the place we're in. And if you put your emotions aside, I think you know I'm right. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is cracking down on dangerous criminals again. Just kidding. No, he's going after Republican political opponents, weaponizing the judicial system against his critics after being rightfully accused of weaponizing the judicial system against Donald Trump. Rich. Yep, now he's got his sights set on Congressman Jim Jordan suing him over Trump indictment subpoenas. So basically, because Jim Jordan is attempting to hold him accountable, Bragg is coming after him. Coming after Trump and now Jim Jordan, as if those two are the biggest dangers to New York freaking City. Nobody is undermining his case against Trump because in order to undermine it, he'd have to have a case to begin with. Joining me now with his take on that and more is former Trump campaign operative Steve Cortez. Steve, it's great to have you.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for having me.
So I want to start out with this. When we heard the news of this yesterday, that now Bragg is coming after Jim Jordan for undermining this case against Trump, I mean, The whole situation with Bragg doesn't really hold much legal water, but could this be something, if anything? Is this going to do anything to Jim Jordan or his attempts to hold Bragg accountable?
No, I certainly hope not. And I think Jim Jordan is doing the right thing because this has become a federal issue. Normally prosecutorial misconduct like Bragg's should be a state issue. But in this case, because he is indicting a former U.S. president and because he is dragging federal election law into it, this is a pertinent and germane federal issue. So there is jurisdiction for the U.S. Congress. But regarding Bragg, look, here's the reality with New York City. New York is a basket case like so many blue major cities in America. It's becoming increasingly a place that is totally inflicted with crime, where regular citizens are not safe. And Alvin Bragg has chosen to not prosecute very dangerous criminals and instead focus his prosecutorial attention on an incredibly politicized and contrived case against the former president, against Donald Trump. And here's why I think everybody should care about this, Tommy, because even if you're not a New Yorker, even if you live nowhere near New York is the capital of the world. I mean, it really is. It is the cultural, financial, business, and media hub of the world. So what happens in New York really matters to the rest of America. And when we see what is really our de facto capital, when we see it descend into the kind of lawlessness that is now, unfortunately, the norm in New York City and other cities, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, across America, where these Soros-backed prosecutors are such menaces to public safety. It's a very real issue for the entire country. And again, it matters not just to New Yorkers, not just to Trump supporters. I think it matters to all of America. Alvin Bragg has shown himself to be a corrupt and politicized buffoon. And at every opportunity Republicans have, including in the U.S. House of Representatives, they need to confront him about it.
What do you think the chances are that Trump gets a fair trial in New York? Because we look at the case and it's weak, and legal experts on both sides of the aisle say it's a very weak case. This is a pretty big leap. I mean, he's facing 136 years. We look at that and we laugh. But we also have to look at the situation in front of us and the place where this is going to really all play out. And I have a little bit of concern that not only is this whole thing weaponized against Trump with the indictment, but I have a little bit of a concern that this could actually hold some water because of the place it's being tried, and Trump could actually be facing real jail time. Do you think that's a possibility, as ridiculous as this whole thing is?
Tommy, as ridiculous as it is, yes, unfortunately. I concur with you. I believe that it is nearly impossible for Trump in Manhattan to find a jury which is willing to really weigh the facts of the case and give him a fair trial. I just think that is the unfortunate reality right now. By the way, this is also why prosecutorial discretion is so important. Prosecutors, if they are being ethical and if they are acting upon conscience and law and precedent, they know that they have tremendous power. And particularly when it comes to a politicized case like this in a place that is as left-leaning as Manhattan, they know that they are almost sure to get convictions against certain targets. And so it is incumbent upon prosecutors then to exercise discretion and to use their judgment to not charge people frivolously. So let's just say Trump is actually guilty of the underlying crime, which is a very, very minor crime. And I'm not saying he is, but just for the sake of argument, let's say that the bookkeeping error was in fact a misdemeanor violation of New York law. Even if that is true, okay, it is an incredibly minuscule crime. What Alvin Bragg has done is he's tried to ratchet it up, he's tried to transform it really through just legal nonsense into a felony. How? Because he claims that it was committed to obfuscate a larger federal crime. Well, if we look at that supposed federal crime, Tommy, the Department of Justice, the highly corrupt, politicized Biden Department of Justice, took a look at this issue from a federal standpoint regarding federal election law and said, you know what? We're going to take a pass. And believe me, it wasn't out of any love for Donald Trump. It wasn't because they were trying to be fair to the former president or because they have any regard for our America First movement. No, it's because they looked at the facts of the case and said, there is nothing here. This is clearly a personal issue that had nothing to do with presidential politics. It was not a violation of federal law or FEC standings. And so there was no federal prosecution brought. That should have ended that issue as a legal potential criminal issue. But instead, we have this incredibly corrupt, politicized New York prosecutor backed by George Soros, who literally ran for office on the promise that he would prosecute Donald Trump. And the fact that he was elected based on that promise, Tommy, that tells us everything we need to know about the electorate in Manhattan. So look, can he get a fair trial there? No, I don't believe he can, which is why this case can never go to trial, in my view. I'm not sure that it will. If there's an honest judge, okay, and I don't have a lot of faith in this judge either that's presiding over the case, but if an honest judge takes a look at this case, this should absolutely be dismissed. So we'll see what happens, but sadly, to answer the root of your question, can he get a fair trial in New York? No, I do not believe he can in Manhattan.
I don't believe so either, but I wonder, because when we're looking at this from the prism of an election in 2024, we know that this indictment of Trump, his arraignment last week, has bolstered him within the Republican Party when it comes to polls and matchups. However, when you look at the broader picture, a new ABC News poll just came out earlier this week that said about 50% of Americans think that Trump should suspend his campaign because of the indictment, and they think that he did something wrong, although they recognize it's probably politically motivated. The average American doesn't really seem to care. They view it as serious. They view it as something that could potentially, at least by perception, eliminate him from the running. So I worry that we have these two things happening at once. The Republicans are rallying around him, but the independents that we so desperately need to win are going the other direction. So for me, my concern is that the Republican Party is not seeing the forest through the trees here, and they're letting their loyalty and their affinity for Trump cloud what could be the biggest election of our lifetime and the real need to win that one. What's your perspective on it?
No, listen, I think you're making an incredibly important point here for hardcore Republicans, for people who are committed to the America First movement, who consider themselves MAGA adherents. This indictment has only reinforced their resolve and their commitment to Donald Trump and to the movement. But for regular Americans who don't necessarily, who aren't, when I say regular Americans, I mean people who aren't all that politically involved, and particularly people who are independently minded politically. And that's a shrinking group, but it's a group that both sides are fighting viciously over to try to earn the support of. When we look at independents, I do think this indictment is absolutely harming Donald Trump, and there's certainly evidence of that in the polls. And I would say this in addition, Tommy, if there is a second indictment and perhaps a third indictment, which I believe there will be, and I think all of them are nonsense. I think all of them are farces. But if there is an indictment in Georgia, if there's a federal indictment regarding the documents at Mar-a-Lago, and I believe both of those are forthcoming. So if we then have 3 indictments of President Trump, and again, I think all of them are ridiculous, okay, and are a persecution rather than a prosecution. But nonetheless, as a campaign operative, as somebody who does messaging for a living, who does campaigns for a living, I will tell you, I firmly believe that successive indictments of Trump will absolutely hurt Trump, particularly among independent voters. There's a certain level of exhaustion where they will just say, I can't sort of take the chaos of this situation.
And that's what it is.
It will absolutely hurt him.
I think you're exactly right, because a lot of people are getting fatigue of this, and it's not his fault. And I wish I could say, screw everybody, we're standing by our man. But this is no ordinary election coming up in 2024. And I'm very concerned that people are sick of the drama. And even Republicans, if they're being honest with themselves, are a little sick of the drama because our country is going to hell. If this was the most important thing right now, was just defending Trump and everything else was great, then maybe this might be the one and only cause we could vote on. But it's not. A lot of other issues. Right. That brings me to my last point I want to bring up with you. We know we had the big Trump-Tucker interview on Fox News last night. I want to play a clip of Trump talking about his potential opponent in 2024. Let's take a listen.
Do you think Biden will stay in the race?
Look, I watch him just like you do. And I think it's almost inappropriate for me to say it. I don't see how it's possible. But there's something wrong. I saw his answer today on television about whether or not he was going to run, to a very nice guy named Al Roker. I mean, you can't get a softer question than that. That was a long answer, talking about the eggs and the this and that. Look, I don't think he can.
So I want to get your take on that. I think most Americans would agree. The Democrats don't even want Joe to run. I believe that they're getting ready for Gavin Newsom to fill that spot. But I wonder how you think this is going to go. How long are they going to wait to dump Joe Biden if you believe that that's what they're going to do? I certainly do.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, Gavin Newsom is certainly acting like he's running for president. He actually has the gall right now to do a tour of successful red states, including Florida, home of the best governor in America, Ron DeSantis, the polar opposite of Gavin Newsom in California. And he's actually going there trying to lecture Florida about what they should do better. Of course, Californians are voting with their feet and leaving the state of California and the kingdom of King Gavin Newsom en masse. But, to the point here that President Trump was making and that you're making, Joe Biden clearly, cognitively, is not able to be president right now. And by the way, that's not his fault. Okay, so there's a lot of things which I will fiercely criticize Joe Biden about. It is not his fault that he is at an age and a state of health where he's not able to do this job. But that's already clear. It is likely to get far, far worse in the coming months and years. Anybody who's been around an old person who is having those kinds of issues knows that. So this is a very real issue for the American people to consider. I think it would have been much more considered in 2020 had Joe Biden actually campaigned. But because the Democrats chose to hide him effectively and the corporate media completely went along with that charade of hiding Joe Biden, the American people didn't have an honest look at what kind of a mental and physical state he was in. Now they do. And so this is absolutely, a huge issue for 2024. My belief ultimately is that Gavin Newsom does end up being the nominee. How exactly do we get there? I'm not sure. But by the way, if he is, be very, very happy to take him on, be very happy to take on the tyranny that he has inflicted upon the people of California. We do not want the California model for the rest of the country. So whether it's Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom, and I think it will be one of the two, is my strong guess, be happy to take on either one in the presidential race.
I think if it is Gavin Newsom, it'll be more of a fair fight, and it's one that I look forward to because you're not able to hide Joe Biden. You're not going to be able to hide Gavin Newsom because there's no reason to, and he doesn't want to be hidden. So I think that it would be a real matchup. I'm going to get to that later with my thoughts on it and my final thoughts. But Steve, thanks for being here in this crazy time in American politics. I hope to have you back soon, and thanks for joining me.
You bet. Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate it.